Welcome to a very special bonus episode. This is our very first Q&A session with me. I'm Rachel Morris. I'm host of the You're Not a Frog podcast. And also with me, I have Dr. Sarah Coop. Now, Sarah has joined me in World Monday, which I'm really excited about. Sarah, just introduce yourself and tell us what your role is now.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you, Rachel. It's great to be here. So I'm so excited. I'm working more closely with you now as Director of Training at World Monday. And it's just brilliant to be working with you. We've worked together for a few years, haven't we? But it's just fantastic. So I've joined you to take over the live training side of things.
People that listen to the podcast regularly, you'll know Sarah anyway. You've been on a couple of podcasts sharing your wisdom. And not only are you a former GP, Sarah, you're a trained mediator.
Yeah. So former GP, worked as a GP for 20 years, but really through the last sort of 10, 15 years, got very interested in conflict resolution. So I was doing quite a lot of coaching with doctors and other healthcare professionals and noticed that a big theme that came through was conflict. And so I trained as a mediator to really help in that space. So coaching, but with that mediation side of things. And then I've worked in medical protection or medical legal sort of field and also NHS resolution. So I've had that real interest in managing complaints, but also managing difficult situations.
It's an area that most people run a mile from, don't they, Sarah? Are you a glutton for punishment or something?
I know. I think I did, to be honest. I think that's why I got interested in it, because it wasn't an area that I felt particularly comfortable or confident in. And I knew I wanted to get much better at it so that I could be more effective myself.
So just to let people know, these episodes, we realised that we didn't really have anything in You Are Not a Frog where we could answer listeners' questions, where we could share what we'd been up to, what we've been hearing, address some of the issues that have been coming up on the Facebook group through some of the courses we've been doing. So we're starting this bonus monthly question and answer episode. It's going to be part of our new membership, which we're going to introduce to you later. But so we're trying out some formats. So we'd love feedback on if this is useful, what else you'd like to hear about, all those sorts of things. We can get special guests on in the future as well. So we thought we'd start off by talking about what we're hearing, what people are asking us, and what we've been, experiencing throughout the last month. Because I've been all over the place, Sarah, and I know you've been to various different places as well, meeting people. Isn't it nice? Firstly, isn't it so nice to go to face-to-face events and actually talk to people rather than just watching them on screen?
It is. It's just the energy, isn't it? There's nothing like being in the room with people. I often talk about being 3D rather than 2D. Just being in the room, really picking up a lot more of the non-verbal cues, but also just connecting with people. It's been great, hasn't it? So yeah, we were chatting the other day and thought it'd be really helpful to share a little bit about what we're hearing and what we're noticing. So what have you been noticing in the last few weeks, Rachel, while you've been doing more in-person work?
Yeah, so I've done quite a few events. In fact, last week I was all the way around the country. So I went to Southampton to do a GP trainers group, the lead without rescuing session. Then I went down to Taunton to do a session for GPs on how to design a career you're going to love. And then I went to Cornwall to do a Women in Leadership and in Practice conference for Kerno Health. Again, GPs on how to design a career and a life you're going to love. And it's really interesting because even though those were separate teaching sessions, the same issue came up in all three of them, and that is around the zone of power. And we talk about the zone of power all the time. So if you've listened to the podcast very much, you'll have heard me talk about the zone of power. For people that aren't familiar with it, it's literally a circle on a sheet of paper, and it talks about what you're in control of and what you're not in control of. So everything inside the circle is the stuff you're in control of, everything outside the circle is the stuff that you are not in control of. And I often start sessions by doing a zone of power with people because in my mind, it's the fundamental question we need to ask, because if you're not in control of it, you can't really do anything about it. And actually that was where people got stuck at the first hurdle, because, for example, in a GP trainers group, and this happens with any GP trainer I talk to, really, I start by asking, what do you feel responsible for? And there's so much we feel responsible for, isn't there? And then when you get to be a leader in any way, shape or form, or you're supervising people, you then feel really responsible for them and what they're doing and what they're learning, and if they pass for exams, and if they're happy at work, and if they're enjoying what they're doing, and if they stay as a GP and stuff. And then suddenly we feel very responsible for all this stuff that's not in our control at all. And when we plot that out on a piece of paper, whether it's being responsible for your trainees, or when we talk about design a career that you're going to love, it's like stuff in your workplace and what's going on and with the patients and what's going on with funding and resources and stuff. There's loads of stuff that's just so outside of our control. There's absolutely nothing we can do about it, but we feel very responsible for it. And that's where we then get stuck and we can't set boundaries because we think, well, I've got to just keep working like this and I can't make any changes because I'm responsible for all this stuff, even though I don't really have any control. And I think we then try and control it by just saying yes to everything, even though it's totally uncontrollable. And what people were asking in all 3 sessions were, well, hang on a sec, that stuff that's out of my control, I can't just let it go. I can't, because what we teach is that, well, you've got 2 choices for that stuff that's out of your control, that either you can get really frustrated and anxious about it, or you can accept it. And then we talked about what does unclouded acceptance look like. But as I was teaching this, and this is one of the insights I sort of came across this week, I realised I wonder if we've been teaching this a bit wrong, because I've been teaching actually that the response is to feel really frustrated and anxious about the stuff that's outside of our control. And yes, we do. But that wasn't the emotion I was hearing predominantly. The predominant emotion I was feeling was guilt, that we feel guilty for the stuff that's outside our control. Guilty, even when there's nothing we can do about it. So then the question came, and I can't remember which session it was, but, should we feel guilty for stuff that's outside of control, or can we feel guilty for stuff that's outside our control, or is it right to feel guilty for stuff that's outside our control? And I guess my reflection on that is, well, whether it's right or wrong or helpful or not, we do. So we are feeling guilty for the stuff that's outside our control. We're feeling guilty if our patients don't get seen at the right time, if they're on a waiting list. We feel guilty if they can't access the healthcare that they want. We feel guilty if our trainees fail their exams. We feel guilty if our kids aren't having a good time. But all of that is outside our control. So I think the predominant emotion we feel is not frustration, it's guilt.
I was just thinking, as you said that, people feel guilty for those things that they feel responsible for. And that's interesting. It's almost like I feel guilty because I feel responsible. I feel guilty because I can't fix it. So going back to how we teach it, we're looking at those things outside of the zone of power. We often talk about how we've just got that choice, as you say, haven't we, in terms of accepting it or becoming more stressed about it. But I wonder, my first question is, why do we feel guilty for those things that are outside of our control?
Because they say, well, I feel awful if they fail their exams. I feel guilty that patients are suffering, or if patients come to harm because of stuff, but then it's outside their control. So I thought, well, what is guilt anyway? I've been sort of looking that up. One definition, a feeling of worry or unhappiness that you have because you have done something wrong, such as causing harm to another person. So that's something that you have done. You have caused harm to another person. A pang of guilt. She remembered with a pang of guilt she hadn't called her mother. Or he suffered such feelings of guilt over leaving his children, things like that. But actually, that's all stuff that you have done or not done. That's something you actually have control over. And guilt, I've heard it described as, it's not a bad emotion. It actually is just a warning bell that you should do something differently, or you could do something differently. So I actually think that it can't be guilt that we feel outside our zone of power, because it's nothing that we can't do anything. Therefore, you can't feel guilty about it. So I've come up with a new word, guiltish.
Interesting. You're right, because actually guilt, when it's in the appropriate sense, is something you can then put right. That's the thing. And so the very fact that you can't put this right because it's outside of your control, then the guilt sticks. So what's the guilt-ish, did you say? Or guilt?
Well, guilt-ish, yeah, because so for me, this is the difference between caring about something and carrying it. So if I carry something because it is my responsibility, and I don't do something that I could have done, and it's my responsibility, then that I will be carrying that, and I will carry that guilt, and that's appropriate guilt. I think inappropriate guilt is feeling guilty for something that I can't do anything about, but that I care deeply about. And I think for me, this difference between caring and carrying is really, really important. I can care very deeply about all that stuff that's outside my zone of power, and it might make me feel guilty, but that is inappropriate guilt. So I can maybe feel guilt-ish, because this was another thing I was thinking of. Somebody asked me, I was talking about the feelings of shame that we sometimes feel when our actions have to go against our deeply internally held values. And someone quite rightly asked me the question, well, why would you ever do something that went against your internal values? So my example was, a while ago, we had somebody join the business and it wasn't working out for them or for us. They didn't have the skills to do what they needed to do. And we spotted that quite early on and we knew it wouldn't work out for them. And I had to have a conversation saying that we were no longer going to use their services. Now, that went against every bit of my internal values, like being kind to somebody, not leaving them in the lurch, making sure that they were okay, helping them. But long term, it wouldn't have helped them. Long term, it wouldn't have helped us. We couldn't afford to carry this relationship on. But it did go against some of my internal values. But for the long-term benefit, I had to have that conversation. So I felt awful doing it. But actually, I knew it was for the best. And actually, for this person, obviously, they were upset. I was upset. But this person has moved on very quickly and they're fine. And they're much better off now. So I felt really guilty because I could have done something different. And that's the problem when we say no about things. And this is in our zone of power. We feel really dreadful about some of these consequences that we don't have any control about. But, I could have done something different. I could have said, yeah, just stay. It won't be good for you or me. So I think this just transferring that, I feel good to know. I feel guilt-ish that just means I'm doing something that I don't like. It's really uncomfortable, but actually knowing deep down it is the right thing to do. So that's another way I might use the guilt-ish.
There's that sort of internal conflict in those situations, isn't there? Where part of you knows it's the right thing to do. And I think there are still some values that you had to honour in that situation. So although it went against some of your internal values, I guess there were other values that decision honoured, as in high quality work and whatever. I'm just guessing, but there's certain things that were important to you. So that makes sense. I think there's a difference here, isn't there, between guilt and shame, and you've touched on that as well. And I think I'm still wondering what's happening in that space for those things that are outside of our control, that we are taking on that sense of responsibility. Are we telling ourselves, I should be able to do something? And we talk a lot about, shoulding ourselves. So I'd be curious to know what's going on behind that feeling of guilt-ish. I'm wondering is it definitely guilt? I mean, you talked about inappropriate guilt. I sometimes think about false guilt, when we take responsibility, which is exactly what we're talking about, take responsibility for things that are actually not our fault. But because sometimes we're in that caring role, we, again, feel like we should be able to make things better. And that can go deeper into, what's the internal pressure behind that? What's all that about? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on?
I think my thoughts are that I think we have been trained as healthcare professionals and particularly as doctors that everything is our responsibility. So we take on this responsibility that is not ours to take. I remember when I was a junior house officer working as a medical house officer, and the coronary care nurses just all decided one day that their certificate for taking blood had run out. Just gone. They did the blood run every morning, but they decided theirs had run out. And so they bleeped me and I had to go and do it every day for the next 2 weeks. I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't question it. I didn't say, hang on a sec, that's not mine to carry. That you need to sort that out. I've got enough of the stuff to do. But as I remember as a house officer, literally, if the cleaners were off sick, you clean. I mean, it was just literally, you did absolutely everything. Probably because you didn't really have a role description. It was like general dog's body, do absolutely everything if no one else would do it. And because we're good people who want to help, and often in healthcare, we're very capable. So we just get on and do stuff, even if it might not be our responsibility. So we've just sort of grown up feeling that everything is our responsibility. I'm thinking of GP trainers with their trainees. They even go as far as some people I've heard, well, if the trainee doesn't get their portfolio in time, they will stay up, come in on their annual leave to mark people's portfolios and things like that. Now, these are grown doctors. They've got themselves to medical school. The trainees have got themselves to medical school. They often have families. They've managed to survive in life, but we then end up treating them like children, probably because we feel so responsible and we want them to do really well. But that just infantilizes them and keeps them in victim, keeps them not taking any responsibility by continually putting ourselves out, this misplaced sense of guilt. And does that answer your question a bit?
It does. I think it's really interesting. So many thoughts are going through my mind because there's the immediate response. So there's a trigger, isn't there? And where does that put you? Either into anger, defensiveness, fear, guilt. And I think it's interesting how we'll tend to take one of those positions. I think there's also going back to the over responsible. We also can over function. So I've often thought about, if I over function, somebody else will under function. And that's in every situation, isn't it? If at home you over function, somebody else will tend to under function. And I think it's, again, recognizing those patterns. And we talk about the drama triangle quite a bit, don't we? And how we can easily take, you said a bit, you did that session, lead without rescuing. So for GP trainers or educational supervisors in secondary care, or any health professional in a sort of supervisory training role, I think it's so easy, isn't it, to over-function, to become over-responsible. And it's recognizing that is, again, a choice, but we're not consciously always taking it. But when we feel guilty about something, that actually, when we ask ourselves, is this something that I can do something about? Is this in my zone of power? If the answer is no, what would you say is another approach to that? Or how do we move from that place of guilt?
It's hard, isn't it? I think what is in your zone of power is to look at it and go, is there anything I could have done? Is there anything I can do? And I think that is part of accepting. So what we teach is you can either feel frustrated, or now I'm going to say we can feel guilty and frustrated, or you can accept it. And the zone of power is very much the serenity prayer of grant me the courage to change the stuff I can change, and the serenity to accept the stuff I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, if you look up the meaning of serenity, I think I've done a podcast episode on this, it's unclouded. That means unclouded acceptance. So to practice unclouded acceptance, I go, what about this thing that I so care about is in my zone of power here? You know, this trainee that I'm so worried that's never getting stuff into me on time. Like, what is in my zone of power here to do? And once I've done all that, you know, it might be set boundaries, tell them there's a deadline, give them a warning 3 days before, say, by the way, I'm going away, I will not mark it, but, you know, give them clear guidance. Say, I can give you some help. There's 10 minutes. I've got a half an hour slot on this day. If you want to come in, I can, you know, give them all the help that you can, set boundaries, set the parameters, let them know, and then you accept it. Unclouded acceptance is saying, have I done everything in my zone of power? And I think that's where we also fall down on this, is we don't do enough that is in our zone of power to do something about it, mainly because sometimes it just takes a bit of courage. And that's where your expertise comes in here, Sarah, which is the having difficult conversations. Because I think most times when we abdicate responsibility for stuff we should actually carry or do something about, it's because it's a difficult conversation.
That's interesting. I was just thinking about the fact that because it's difficult, sometimes we don't want to do it, and it works both ways. So I just was going to say the phrase, you know, just because I could do it doesn't mean I should. That sometimes can be work either way, can't it? We can often think, well, I could fix that situation for the trainee, I could fix that situation for the patient, or maybe try to, but that doesn't always mean we should. But then the other way we can talk ourselves sometimes out of having those difficult conversations is, well, just because I could have that difficult conversation doesn't mean I should, so we don't. And so I think, again, it's that wisdom to know the difference, isn't it? The wisdom to know what we need to do in those situations. I think the unclouded acceptance is so key, isn't it? Recognizing, is there anything, what's the feeling I have? Do I feel fearful, stressed, angry, defensive? Is there any reason for that? Is there any grounding for that? And what could I do differently? What could I? And if there honestly is nothing, then that's part of it. But I think the big part is we still want to have empathy, even when we can't. And I wonder if that's why it's so hard sometimes when we do set boundaries and someone isn't happy with our boundary. Or, I mean, we talk a lot about how difficult it is to break bad news as healthcare professionals. It's often because it goes against our values that you were talking about earlier, our values of wanting to improve things, wanting to make a positive difference. And so often in those situations, it's completely outside our control, the illness that the person's experiencing, that the bad news we've got to break. But we've learned, probably a lot of us as healthcare professionals, those models where it's accepting that we can't make the news better for the person, but we can really empathise. And I think empathy goes a really long way in these difficult conversations. Empathy for ourselves, and also empathy for the other person.
I was listening to a mediator talking recently at a conference, and she does a lot of conflict resolution, stuff like that. And she said that in her experience, the thing that really moves people stay completely stuck until one thing happens. And the one thing that needs to happen for the conversation to move on is that the party needs to know that the other side understands their point of view. They don't need to agree with it, but they know that they need to be totally heard and understood. And that was really interesting to me. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Because I know that I can cope with a difficult decision or one that I don't agree with, as long as I know that they understand why I want the different, that they've thought about my point of view, and then you can move on.
There's a saying, isn't there? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Oh, okay, that's nice. Like that.
And I think sometimes, and I can speak for myself, but sometimes I kind of want to show how much I know. Well, this is why I can't do that, or this is why that situation is like it is. But actually, starting with, they don't care about that until they know how much I care.
So it's interesting. So this leads on quite nicely. There's been some questions in the Facebook group, the You Are Not a Frog Facebook group. So if anybody wants to talk to us through stuff, join the Facebook group. We'll answer questions. I put a post in because I was thinking about this, and I was asking people, when you feel powerless, what sort of things do you feel powerless about? People have said when you get passed over, ignored or forgotten, when you are ill or have a chronic illness or disability. Someone else said, I've reached out for support and got told basically tough, you still need to deal with it. Or, well, everyone else is managing it, so it must be you. Oh yeah, this goes to exactly what you just said. When your boss outright says they hear you or if they've heard you, but it feels like they disregarded what you've said anyway.
I think that's where further conversations need to happen. So there needs to be some psychological safety, I suppose, to be able to go back to the boss if in that situation and say, this is how I feel. It's a bit the non-violent communication. So when you asked me for my thoughts, or when you heard me say this is what was important to me, and you then took this action or you responded in this way, this is how I felt. And I guess it's just being clear with the other person about the impact of that without blaming, but just stating and asking them, being really curious about, well, I'm just curious to know what was behind your decision to do that. And I suppose it's bringing into the light rather than sitting in a corner feeling those feelings of being dismissed or ignored, because those feelings won't go away by themselves. And sometimes by bringing it into the light, we get a different perspective. They didn't realise we felt like that. They didn't mean to do that. Other times we might find out that there is some other intention behind that. And then that leads into that conflict resolution space. I think it's about not sitting with those feelings and actually being direct.
So not sitting, feeling unheard,
actually
challenging it. But so you said there needs to be psychological safety, but you can't, that's not in your control.
No.
So what if there isn't psychological safety?
Well, that's a real challenge, isn't it? And I think that's a bigger question. So if there's not psychological safety in that relationship, then who else can support you? And so it might be that you have that conversation still, but with somebody else there, for example, or you might seek advice through other channels to have that. But I think that's my first question is, what's stopping you have that conversation? And what's that tell you about you, maybe, but really about them or about the culture that's stopping that happen? I've worked with quite a lot of teams where there isn't psychological safety. It's not safe to speak up. It's not safe to challenge. It's not safe to disagree. And as leaders, we have to role model that. And that is within our control we can't make everyone make it safe, but it's within our control to really call it out, to influence, to change, to make sure that we put things in place so that shifts.
One thing that I would say, and we had an interesting discussion in one of our memberships, is along the lines of, I've reached out for support. I've told them how I feel, and the conversation went really badly. So I thought I was acting in my zone of power, but they didn't hear me. It went really badly. But when we talked a bit further about how they had the conversation, we got into the whole going over the net thing, and actually how they had the conversation often, and this is often true for me, is that we think we've told them how we're feeling, but actually what we're doing is blaming the other person and saying, this is how you've made me feel, you've acted like this, and I just need to tell you. And you're never going to get a good result like that. You're just going to get people's backs up. And one of the most helpful concepts I've ever come across is this over the net thing.
Do you want to say a bit more about that? Because that might not be a concept people...
Yes, I'm sure I talked about it in this podcast before, but they teach this at Stanford University in the interpersonal communication course. In any conversation, there's always three things going on, but there's some stuff that's in your head, like your intentions, your assumptions, the impact what I'm saying has on you. There's stuff in my head, like my intentions, my assumptions, the impact, all that sort of stuff. Now, me and you, we can only ever know two of those three things. what's going on for me and the behaviour I can see. You can only know what's going on for you, the behaviour you can see. And actually, we're recording this on Riverside, where literally there is, if I move my pen across, there's a barrier. There's a barrier there. You can't see any further. So that is a net. That's a net. Now, if I say something that assumes I know what's going in your head, I've gone over the net. So if I say, Sarah, you've really been judging me for being off sick. You've not been supporting me right. You've not been supporting me with my illness. That is over the net, because I don't know for sure that you've not been supporting me. Okay. Now, you might not have done the right things, so I could say, you haven't done this thing which would make me feel more supported. Now, that's not over the net, because that's behaviour. Have you done it? Haven't you done it?
So it's like you could say, oh, you haven't called me to check how I'm doing, and I've felt unsupported. And that's different to saying you haven't supported me.
Well, actually, and interestingly, they would also say, I felt unsupported. Well, is unsupported a feeling? That's not a feeling. I felt sad. I felt upset. I felt disappointed. I felt worried. I felt anxious,
It's a really good point, that, isn't it? Because often I think we don't always think of what is the emotion I felt?
I felt unsupported. Actually, even that is a judgment. That's gone over the net. So if I say to you, Sarah, I felt unsupported, well, that's way over the net. That's saying you've been unsupporting me. Now I could say, Sarah, I felt sad because you didn't call me last week. And then the story in my head was that you weren't supporting, you didn't care. And that gives you a chance to either go, oh, no, you're right, I'm sorry, but it wasn't that I didn't care. And then we're on the same page, rather than I felt, or you've been inconsistent or inappropriate, or So just that, stick to your side of the net, stick to what you feel and the behaviour that you've seen. So, Sarah, when you rostered me on for those 5 a.m. shifts, even though I've told you I'm really struggling to sleep at the moment, so I'm really struggling to wake up, that made me think that you hadn't understood what my issues are at the moment. Can I just check that? That made me feel frustrated, because I thought I'd explain, but can I check? And then you're like, oh, okay. You're going to be much less defensive, aren't you? And then I'm going to be heard a lot better. So I guess when these questions about how can I be heard, how can I force someone to hear me more? Essentially, you can't, but you can say stuff in such a way that might help them hear you more, but you've still not got control.
No, that's maybe think about the psychological safety again. So part of it is, yes, we can't make the other person make it safe for us, but we can make it safe for them. And it's recognizing that we may trigger them into feeling unsafe if we come across as maybe, legitimately, but if we come across in any way attacking or judgmental, other people will have their response. And we talked earlier, didn't we, about you might feel angry, you might feel frustrated, you might feel defensive. And that's the challenge. So one thing I often talk about in conflict resolution is, if you notice the other person reacting in a way that, those negative ways, possibly they don't feel safe. And of course, we're not responsible for the other person's feelings, but in order to have a positive outcome, or as good a chance of a positive outcome, it's recognizing that and reading it. And it goes exactly to what you're saying about not being over the net. So I think there's something there, yes, being really descriptive with what we've noticed, owning our own feelings, and also do what's within our power to make it safe for them to stay in dialogue with us.
And I think we don't think enough about, how have I said it? And we think we're just sharing and being open, but actually it's an attack on that person. As soon as someone says, I feel unsupported, or I was listening to a really good podcast with Esther Perel. Have you come across Esther Perel? She's a French relationships counsellor, and she's just got the most beautiful way of talking. And she's talking about, in relationships, often you're so scared of asking for what you want that what you do is just criticize. You never asked me about this, when you're wanting to say, I want you to ask me about my day. You'll come out with, oh, you never asked me about my day. When you actually, so you make these accusations and criticisms when actually you're just trying to ask for what you need. So starting off with, I really need this, and can I just ask you what was going on with you? And I think get curious, just like, oh, that's interesting. If someone genuinely said to you, like everyone else is managing, or that, check that out. You could, Sarah, I've got this impression, or in my head, is that maybe it feels like everybody else is managing except for me. Does that story sometimes go around your head?
Where's the evidence for that, really?
So can I ask what makes you think that, and just get really curious about that. I mean, all this is really difficult, isn't it?
It is difficult because it often feels like it shouldn't be this hard, and it's hard because we haven't learned it in the way that helps it to feel more natural. And so it's sometimes unlearning and natural sort of automatic reactions, isn't it? And then having to almost rewrite the program so that those more, I suppose, constructive reactions and responses become eventually the normal for us. But it is hard to unlearn, and it is hard to go against, I suppose, that in a kind of recoil that then just means we say something we wish we hadn't. I think it's really true about asking for what we need and be really clear about that. I often talk about hinting and hoping and how that doesn't tend to work.
Oh, yeah.
And
hints and hope.
We can often do that, can't we? Drop a hint and hope that the other person will pick that up or read our minds. And the other person doesn't have to say yes to when we make a request for our needs, but at least, again, we've put it on the table. We've been really clear about it. And if they're not able to, then it's a request, isn't it? Not a demand. And
I felt really pissed off in the past when someone has said to me, well, you didn't do this, you didn't know that. I'm like, I didn't know you needed that. I feel really let down. It's like, how dare you badge me as a really bad person, as thoughtless or whatever, when I didn't know. I didn't know. I'm not a mind reader. You've been hinting, but the hints have been really going under my radar.
So maybe the learning from that, what's the take home message from that?
Say what you need.
Yes.
In a non-judgmental way, rather than like, I really need this. Is that possible? How does that land with you? What are you thinking? What are your stories? Anything in your head that you're worried about or wondering about, let's just share it. Just tell me what you think.
I think that's so helpful. So you said about Esther Perel. Any other learning or any other resources that would be useful to share with listeners?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of stuff. I was just thinking that there's a couple of questions actually that came in that WhatsApp group also about zone of power. So I just want to fire them at you, Sarah. Printer stops working.
It's like all IT issues, isn't it?
What's in his, what do you do at that point?
I guess you decide, is it urgent, don't you? And then if it's urgent, you're going to find a friend with a printer. I don't know. I mean,
IT is really annoying. That's something that can feel really out of your zone of power. Yeah. So that's the sort of thing we've been talking about. I've got a few resources to share in a minute. Sarah, you've been out and about as well. What have you been noticing?
Yeah. So I've been out and about doing some different talks to you, but the same sorts of themes in terms of leading without rescuing, I think, and also just some of the more wider shapes that we teach. I think I'm hearing quite a lot in the wellbeing space and particularly in the burnout space. So I sometimes joke that I have antibodies to the word resilience, but I mean that in terms of just the way that sometimes you talk about resilience, victim blaming, how we can feel that, oh, you should just be more resilient. And that's where I think my antibodies can come up. But when we talk about what does wellbeing and resilience really mean, I think the whole sort of necessary self-care, looking after ourselves, is so important, just being reminded about that. But also recognising, and I know you've had Nick Petrie on the podcast talking about burnout and the different levels of burnout, and I'd really recommend people listen to that, because the reason we sometimes have that resistance to resilience is because if we're not just first degree burnt out, we're second degree or third degree burnout, the superficial things don't work. And we need that deeper shift, deeper change, which we haven't got time to maybe go into today, but that episode covers that really well. What people are I'm hearing people talk about is that burnout on repeat. And I've certainly experienced that myself, where I took some time off after being quite significantly burnt out and then went back into a very similar situation and wondered why I felt quite burnt out very quickly again. And I've heard other people say the same. Nothing has really changed apart from perhaps some time to recover. And so I was really reflecting on this week, and I'd like to share a model that I sort of came up with in my mind the other day. I was on a train and IT was out of my zone of power, so I couldn't use my laptop. So I thought, okay, I'll get my notebook out and I'll just do some old fashioned kind of journaling and reflection. And it was really interesting what came to mind. So I was thinking, okay, if you're burnt out, that gives you the picture of a fire. How do you relight the fire within you in a way that's sustainable? And so I was sort of thinking, okay, how do you make a fire? And I'm not somebody who's particularly outdoorsy in terms of making a fire from some sticks and reflecting the sun on a piece of mirror or anything like that. But I thought basically you would need to source some fuel. You need to also place the fuel in a way that air can circulate. So there's like a structure to that and there's space. And then of course you need oxygen. You need to be able to have good quality air. There's no point lighting a fire in under a blanket. Well, actually, probably there is, because the blanket would take light up, wouldn't it? But you need a flow of oxygen and you need good quality air. And then you need a spark. So the way my mind works is often to try and come up with some sort of mnemonic, isn't it, to that I remember. So that came up with SOS. So source of fuel for the first S, but also structure and space around the way the fuel is laid. Then oxygen and then the second S, spark. So I was thinking, okay, so how does that apply both for me and the people that I've been listening to? So often we can resource some fuel when we've been burnt out. We can, take some recovery time. We can build up our energy store. That's what the fuel's all about. We can create a bit more space in our life. And that's certainly what I did do. Took some time off work, really tried to slow down to create some space, some thinking, built up my energy, physical energy, emotional energy. So I really did that bit. But then if we go back into an environment where there isn't much oxygen, there isn't much life, maybe that sense of life and oxygen is it's not there because there's a bit of a toxic culture, or there's not supportive relationships, or the air kind of gets sucked out of that environment. We often talk about that. It's just like it's sucking the life out of me. I've heard people say that kind of phrase. What do they mean by that? And often it is a lack of positivity, a lack of communication or unresolved conflict that deoxygenates the environment. Or it's that, I've gone back into environments where the demand is still very, very excessive. So the fuel just burns up so quickly, or it's almost like there's no space between the fuel. So yeah, think about the fuel and the oxygen. But then the spark, to get back to having a fire within us, we need that spark. What's that about? Well, I think it's all about finding the joy. What is it that you love doing? What is it that brings you that sense of satisfaction, of being able to be your authentic self, the person that you know this is you, using your gifts, working in the areas of your life that we talked sometimes about, the zone of genius, don't we? What is it that you really love that gives you that state of flow when you're working and it maybe doesn't feel like work? So I think for some of us, and this was for me, I've gone back into environments where either I didn't have sufficient fuel, or there wasn't sufficient oxygen in the environment, or I didn't have a spark. So I maybe could do the work, but I just didn't love it, and that was missing. And they say, the research sort of shows, we need at least 20% of our job needs to be really fulfilling and bring us joy. So it doesn't have to be the whole 100%, but as long as there's at least 20% of your work that is stuff that you absolutely love, that's probably sufficient spark.
I love it. I've got a couple of reflections. Firstly, that working in your zone of genius. A couple of the talks I've been doing this week have been how to design a career you're going to love. And that bit about zone of genius, a lot of medics, we just don't know. We don't know what our zone of genius is. Like seeing patients. Well, what about the seeing patients? And when we got people to sit down and actually work out what that might be, a lot of people said, actually, I love talking to patients. I love talking to patients. Someone's like, you might think me really weird, but I love those really difficult conversations with patients in the vulnerable times. I feel I'm really good at that. That's brilliant. Another person said, I love admin. And everyone was like, really? But no, she did. She said, I would do it for other people. Like, that is so brilliant. There are some people that are really good and organised and admin, and God knows the world needs those sorts of people. But we haven't actually worked it out. A lot of us haven't done strength surveys. We don't know what our values are. We don't know what our really unique skills are. And that's why we are developing a mastermind very soon called Leapfrog. So if anyone's interested in a career development mastermind, just drop us an email, hello@youarnotafrog.com. But I think, first of all, most of us don't know what our zone of genius is. Therefore, we end up just doing this stuff that we're not particularly interested in. We might be quite good at, but we don't love doing it. And I think we'll do another episode on zone of genius because it's so important. Secondly, the oxygen. It's so true. I've lost count of the amount of people I've spoken to. They've burnt out. They've gone to exactly the same environment. It's like being poisoned, lead poisoning, and then going back to drinking the water. Like, why do you think you're going to be any better if nothing has changed? If there's been absolutely no changes, that's madness, isn't it? Like, madness is doing the same thing again and again, or something, and
expecting
like that.
It to be a different outcome. But I think we think, because I was the problem. That's the false guilt, isn't it? I was the problem. It's because I ran out of energy. That's why I burnt out. So therefore, if I recharge, replenish my stores, I can cope with going back in there. And that's where I have that resistance sometimes to some of the messages that are out there, because it's not just about you replenishing your stores. We know that burnout is a workplace phenomenon. So therefore, things, again, what's within our control is to look after ourselves, yes. But one of the problems is going back into that environment where it's so deoxygenated. And there are things we can do. If we we can breathe. But as metaphorically, there's about, how do we bring some breath into a difficult situation? Sometimes people have said to me, and this has really, been lovely when people have said it, you're like a breath of fresh air. And I've sometimes thought, I've heard that a few times. What is it that I'm doing that people are giving me that feedback? And maybe it is that I may be coming in with some different ideas, but maybe also some boundaries, because I don't want to get burnt out again. And because I'm consciously setting those boundaries, that's maybe helped other people to feel that they can do that. I don't know. It's interesting, but just that I've had that feedback a little bit, and it's made me think, oh, that again fits with the oxygen. So how can we be fresh air in our sort of environments, but also what's not within our power and what do we not need to take responsibility for?
I think that's really important, particularly when it comes to workplace culture. There is a lot of stuff that you can't control, like the way the leadership team might be or whatever. But there is some stuff we can control, like the relationships within your department, your practice, going for coffee with people, having lunch with people, just creating that atmosphere where people are chatting to each other. Like, that is under your control, because you can always go and ask someone to have lunch with them or to have a cup of coffee, and you make those small relationships and then encourages other people to. Or, I was once working with a team, they organised a bake-off once on a Tuesday or something like that. It was great.
I think it's so true, because those are the things that you can bring that connection, you can bring that communication in, you can build that support, but also some of those more difficult conversations. And I've been in situations where I've chosen to call out some difficult behaviour. I love the podcast with Chris Turner, The Civility Saves Lives. And we've got him speaking, haven't we, at the Frogfest Virtual. Just a little plug for that. There are still tickets available.
28th of November, tickets available to the end of October. Oh no, actually there might not be tickets by the time people get this, but there will be, you'll be able to get it on replay. So yeah, we'll let you know how to do that.
And we'll be having another one soon. So that'll be good. But I think just thinking about how we have to speak up sometimes in those situations to detoxify the air where there is unresolved conflict, that isn't easy, but we've talked about that so a little bit already.
Yeah. Just a side note, Sarah, I've always found actually that when the atmosphere is very toxic, there's no oxygen, it's often because there's stuff that's been unsaid. Stale air, yeah, and the pipe is blocked. But as soon as you call something out, even if it's really difficult, and I remember doing this once with someone who I noticed there was an atmosphere someone hadn't seen for a while, and they'd been emailing me, and I just not got back to them, and said, when I saw him, he was a bit funny with me. I was like, I'm really sorry. I said, I'm feeling like, actually, I'm just going to call it out. I'm feeling really bad because I feel like I might have done something to upset you. And he said, you have actually. And he told me. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, I forgot to answer. And honestly, it just felt like fresh air had come flooding into the room, even though I was really upset. I went to the toilets and cried for 10 minutes. But then I came back and I was like, thank you for telling me. That's so helpful now. Thank you. And it was just so much better. So it's that unsaid, nasty, under the surface stuff that tends to
need to clear the air, literally clear the air.
It does clear the air. I mean, there can be stuff on the surface which is equally bad. But I think also there is something about the zone of genius thing, and I think some people who do experience burnout and repeat, that thing that we mentioned earlier about what everyone else is managing, why can't I? What's wrong with me? Am I weak? And often we blame ourselves for being weak, for being a bit acopic and stuff, when actually the problem isn't that we're weak and acopic, it's just we're not working in our zone of genius at all. And it doesn't suit us. But other people might be thriving in that environment because it's their zone of genius and it suits them. So we compare ourselves and we go, oh, what is wrong with me? And I've suffered with that, looking around and looking at people that are thriving, thinking, I hate it here, but I'm just obviously weak or whatever. The minute I've moved into an environment that actually suits me, I've absolutely thrived and flourished. But back to the guilt thing, we then feel guilty. We feel there's something wrong with me, and we take it and we blame ourselves. That medic thing about blaming ourselves, it's my fault. And actually, no, it's just this particular fire isn't your fire. It doesn't work for you. It works for them, doesn't work for you. Nothing wrong with you. But in your zone of power is to then explore where is the right environment for you. And there is nothing wrong with doing that. And you haven't failed, you haven't copped out, and you are not dumping on your colleagues.
Yes, it's challenging this guiltish feeling. I think we're going back full circle here. It's really challenging that. And asking and self-awareness as well, really asking ourselves, where do I feel like I thrive? Not just survive, but where do I thrive? And just because other people, like I say, get a lot of energy perhaps from doing certain things, where do I get my energy?
And stop feeling guilt. Let's just ditch the guilt of feeling that because I don't like doing that thing that the other person does. It's fine. You're a different person. Isn't it great that we're all different? Otherwise, frankly, nothing would get done.
Exactly. No, that's the thing to celebrate, isn't it? But I think maybe in terms of take-home messages from the burnout SOS, so I'd love to know what people think having heard that and how that fits for them. It's looking at that, isn't it? Looking at it and thinking, okay, what kind of fuel, if I'm going to get really into the fire analogy, do I need for this situation? What's the best fuel for that, and what's the environment? And just asking yourself, have you really thought about all of those different aspects, the source of fuel, how you space it, have you thought about the oxygen that you're in, and have you thought about what's the spark for you? And all of those three things need to be there, because the fire doesn't happen without one of those.
So we'd love to hear your comments about this episode. So this episode is going to go in our new membership, and we did just want to mention the membership, because I was at another conference and someone came up to me and really kind of gave me some lovely feedback about the podcast. She really enjoyed it. It's keeping her sane, which is just wonderful to hear. And she said, "Oh, I keep meaning to join one of your memberships or buy stuff. I just haven't had the time to do it." And I was like, that's absolutely fine. And what we've noticed, we did a listener survey quite recently. So thank you so much if you were one of those loads and loads of people filled it in. It was so helpful for us that you love these resources. You just haven't got much time. So we wanted to make these resources available to you on a bite-sized level, on a really bite-sized level, because we know that most people don't have very much time. There's time where you might want some more support, so you might want to do one of our longer courses, but a lot of you at the moment, you just need these bite-sized things that you can listen to in the car, that you can when you're walking the dog, on your way home from work, at the gym. And so we are going to start a You Are Not a Frog membership called FrogXtra. It's basically just under £10 a month, and that includes VAT. And for that, you will get this extra bonus podcast once a month. So there'll be one just like this, me and Sarah, possibly some guests as well, where you can submit questions. We'll talk about things we've noticed, things that just come to us during the month. We'll try stuff out, ideas out on you, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And you'll be able to put comments and stuff and interact with us under this. You'll also get access to every month, it's a less than 5 minute video tool that we send out. We're already sending this out to lots of our members in some of our memberships. It's a video. We call it a Work Well booster, between 3 and 5 minutes of me or Sarah or one of our Shapes trainers explaining a bite-sized concept really quickly, something that you can immediately reflect on and put into action. Now, the great thing about these videos is that they also come with an activity that you can use with your team or on your own. So there's a 5-minute activity with a team discussion, a 20-minute activity, or a 40-minute activity. So you can just use that as training in groups or team meetings and things like that. So we will provide the library that these wellbeing booster videos go in. So these really bite-sized videos. If you don't do anything, all you need to do is just listen to it or watch it. That'll take you 5 minutes once a month, and that'll be a new concept. So who knows, the SOS thing might come out in it. I don't think we've done one on Over the Net yet, so we'll do one on Over the Net. So these will all come out to you along with the library. And also we are going to deliver the CPD reflective workbooks through the membership now, so that we can just continue to produce really good content, to produce the reflection workbook. So as you know, we have been producing a worksheet for every single podcast episode that we do, so that you can fill them in and use them for your appraisal. So you get free CPD, essentially. We want to continue doing that. But as you can imagine, editing, running this podcast, it does cost us some money. So it would be really helpful for us just have some supporters. So the membership, you'll get these resources, but also be your way of supporting the podcast if it has been at all useful to you. So you'll get the booster videos, short videos, one a month you can listen to, and you'll get an email with all these in it. You'll get a longer video podcast episode with me and Sarah, just like this one, which will be in your membership section. We'll also, as well as the video bit, we'll put it in as an audio so you can just listen to it as a podcast. You'll get your library of these wellbeing boosters so you can use those with your team if you want to. You'll also get discounts to all our FrogFest virtuals and our FrogFest lives as well. So you'll get our special members discounts. So we would love you to join us in the membership, where you'll be able to put comments, you'll be able to interact with us, you'll be able to listen through an app on your phone as well. So it's really easy to do. Is there anything extra about the memberships worth mentioning, Sarah, that I haven't mentioned already?
I think it's really comprehensive. I think just the messages, we'd love to hear from you, because as you said about people filling in the survey, it's just great to know what's going on in your worlds, so that we can then really take that, and it helps us both with the live training and also, like you said, Rachel, the podcast content, the memberships, all all of that, because we want to serve you. That's the thing, isn't it? We want to be able to be really relevant and really applicable with what we're talking about.
And this is really our way of really trying to get a community together of professionals who are choosing to thrive in work and life. The podcast is going to continue to be free. You can get that on your normal podcast player, so you can get a weekly episode. This is a bonus extra episode. We've released this on the podcast feed so you can hear a bit about it and experience the format. But for the next one, it's going to be for members only. So we would love to hear your questions and your thoughts, and we will aim to answer them. So you can either just email your questions and we will discuss them. We'll probably experiment with some sort of voice note leaving as well at some point. And we would just be really grateful if you could support the podcast, which will just enable us to create even more resources for you guys. Just before we finish, Sarah, I thought it'd be really nice in these extra podcast episodes if there were some resources you come across recently that have been really helpful to you. We could quickly share those for people. What have you come across that you would recommend?
Oh, I've a few things this last few weeks. One is the Crucial Conversations book. I read it a few years ago, so it's by Grenny and Patterson, and I've just picked it up and read it again. Really helpful for just remembering what's the story in our head and how to have those crucial conversations. That's one thing. I think I've also been listening to a podcast called Insight. It's run by two psychologists, and they're talking a lot around difficult relationships in terms of past relationships. It could be in childhood or just around emotional aspects and the topic of narcissism.
Yeah, well, I just listened to an Esther Perel podcast on the Knowledge Project. And the Knowledge Project is one of my favourite podcasts ever. So I'll stick the link in the notes. That's all about how to have better relationships. The couples guidance psychologist, counsellor. I don't quite know how you describe her, but she's totally brilliant. So we'll put that link in the show notes. And I've just read a book actually that's really affected me, and I absolutely loved it. It's a book by Meg Mason called Sorrow and Bliss. So it's a work of fiction. It's about a family and love and marriage, but it's basically about somebody who has a severe mental health issue. She doesn't actually say what it is, and it's weird because it's a fictional mental health issue that's been made up, so you can't quite put it. I was trying to work out what it was the whole time, but you can't quite put it in a box. But I quite like that because you can't put her in a box, you can't badge her, but it's about the effect it has on the family. But it's so beautifully written. I just absolutely loved it. So if anyone's looking for a book to read, Meg Mason, Sorrow and Bliss. I really enjoyed that. So we'll put that in the show notes as well. And if anybody else has got any resources to recommend, we'll also put a section in the membership where you can recommend those, or go into our Facebook group, because the You Are Not a Frog Facebook group is going to continue to be free for anybody to access as well. So Sarah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation today.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Rachel. Wonderful.
Please get in touch with us, youarenotafrog.com. If you want to find out more about the membership, go to youarenotafrog.com/members, and please join up. We would love to see you in there. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next month for another one of these.
Wonderful. Bye.